make no law that designates what? A religion as a state religion. And we shall have freedom of speech and freedom of political in voting, which will be free. That's a most important First Amendment. But sometimes we act as though that does not exist. We forget about it, or we don't work to keep it safe and sacred. We don't want to coerce people into being a member of any political party, I hope. And we don't want to coerce people to be a member of any particular religious affiliation. Though if you look at some of our doctrines, they border on disenfranchising people in voting. If you're put into a group which is largely a particular party, then the end result may be that your vote, if you're in the minority, doesn't count much. So we have some issues, but there is a group called the Freedom from Religion Foundation. I don't know whether you've heard of that group or not, but I imagine some of you have. Have you heard, what's the Reagan's son, Ron?
Ronald Reagan Jr.
Ron.
He's the chief atheist.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of burning in hell.
Does that, let's be honest, does that offend you in some way?
Is that what?
Offend you in some way?
No.
I'm glad you're
I've been burning in
Yeah,
hell.
it doesn't offend me, but I just feel, who does he think he is to know this? This seems arrogant or something.
It does have an arrogance about it, it does, you're right. But he comes from his family, you know. That's kind of not surprising. He come from privilege.
I watch Bill Maher sometimes, and I can say some of the language he uses I hear when I walk down the halls at school. So I can be offended by that and offended at school. But he's an atheist, and he has Bill Maher. He was a comedian. He started off as an actor and comedian. But he has a diverse group of people and interviews them on his show, and I enjoy watching them. And he's very liberal, but at the same time, he is not everybody who walks across the stage as a liberal he doesn't necessarily follow what they say. But when he doesn't do it as much now, but he used to get on this anti-church thing, and I just exercise my right and switch stations. So,
That's right.
I guess, when I listen to Ron Jr. talk, and it gets so that it's offensive, I just don't listen. And it is offensive.
But he does have a right
It is.
to speak.
Oh, yeah.
I think so.
And sometimes we will find people who are supporters of the freedom from religion group in places that we didn't expect to find it. And I found one that was sent to me, a woman named Ann Tyler, who was an official in the Baptist church, a high official in the Baptist church, who was coming out and speaking against Christian nationalism. Now, from my experience with country Baptist churches, that Christian nationalism was not frowned on, I don't think. It was, it was
Encouraged.
but she is a traditional Baptist. Up until 40 years ago, approximately 40, 50 years ago, every Baptist, well, not every, but the common Baptist understanding dating from Anabaptist back in from their experience in Europe was you do not mix government and religion and your faith. And that has changed radically in the last 40 to 50 years in terms of there is a Baptist group that is still, and American Baptist and others, that's a denomination, that still stands with the traditional Baptist understanding.
And I dare say in the Methodist Church, you would find both positions probably elucidated.
Back in the 70s, Jo Ann, some of you may remember, we had a preacher in this church and a very active member in this church to run on the Board of Education. And I went to both of them and asked them to please not run. I said, in my opinion, we're small, and I know at that time we were filling the church and all of that, but I did not think it was wise. They were the opposite party of the party that was in control at the time, and I got a lot of flack at school because of
and the community of the church was perceived to be politically aligned,
yes, and they were not the party that was kind of going back then. And I went to, and of course it did no good. They ran anyway, and they lost. I knew they would, and I said, don't put yourselves or the church through this. At the time, it was just not done.
That brings up a really interesting question, and that question is, if you're a minister, or if you're a pastor, do you not have a right to have political views?
but I think you can't espouse them in church or you lose your tax status.
That's right.
Supposedly.
Right.
I
I think you have a right to your views. You have a right to be affiliated with any party you want to. I discourage a minister from getting too out there and too politically involved. I think it's more than just you. It's you are doing something to your church.
Margaret,
And that's just
one of the things that I have found interesting here lately is the vocal, all the vocal rhetoric that has been around the Graham family. And, you know, from very, very conservative and very pro-Trump, frankly, to actually one of the daughters is very anti. So I think it's very interesting to see that
But what did Jesus say?
The Grant's family.
The son is
the
Mary,
church that I belong to in Chapel Hill.
and was Seymour the pastor?
Yes.
And he had been at Mars Hill.
Yeah.
When I was a student at Mars Hill, so Mars Hill College at that time was affiliated with a very liberal kind of view, a position there that I think shifted a bit later.
But it's still on the liberal side.
before Bob Seymour was here.
Yes.
And then Bob Seymour was, in my experience with him, he was not a, what would you say? He was not an overly active liberal. He wouldn't have run for school.
Right.
No.
But he was, well, I admired him a lot.
I did too.
Well, was more moderate.
Yeah. So,
But Jesus clearly said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and unto God what is God's. So, you cannot, though, if you are one person with one brain and one heart and soul, you cannot divide yourself and be split. Can you? Do you, what? Yeah.
When the Pharisees pulled that little deal on Jesus, before he asked them for the coin, I believe I got this understanding right, is the law says that we can't do such and such, but the Romans says we have to do such and such, whatever it was. The Romans, this is required, but if you interpret our religious law this way, it means we're not supposed to do this. So what do we do? And then Jesus simply pulls out the coin and says, well, you're not, it has nothing to do with our religious law. If the Romans want this, give it to them. We don't have to change our moral, the way we behave to each other and following our religious law. It has nothing to do with the other law. We should be able to separate them.
But it gets extremely sticky if, for instance, here are two cases. Number one is personal, if for a person, if it is a time of war, but yet you are a conscientious objector to war, when you are drafted, what do you do?
I had a good friend who's now dead, who was forced to leave a Methodist church during World War II because he had two sons. One was in the Navy, the other was a conscientious objector. And he refused to disown his conscientious objector son.
Was he the pastor?
He was the pastor of his church. That's, I guess, underscoring your point. As I think all of you know, I have very strong opinions religiously and politically.
No.
I've been facing this issue all my life. And one thing I have, and I have because my involvement in the civil rights movement in the 60s and 70s was based on my faith. And that was true of many. It was true of a lot of the black leaders of the church. That is a moral, ethical issue. It was also a very political issue. I never from the pulpit preached about a political opinion, but I did preach strongly about God's commandment through Jesus of love for all people and justice for all people. that was very controversial. I was asked to leave a church because of that. We have two different, at least two different prominent positions in the church. And it's interesting how they've changed. Who has them has changed. One is preachers ought to stay out of politics, period. The other one is because you are a pastor, you must speak for faith and for justice and the value of all people and the rights of all people, which has been in the black church primarily, or at least led by the black church. My own feeling is that no, I don't want to tell you from the pulpit how to vote. And I don't want the church as a denomination to tell you how to vote. But the church has an obligation to stand up to power and to stand up for all people, not our denominational self-interest, but our ethical and moral understandings informed by our faith. And it's hard to walk that line. But I think of Pastor Warnock, who is now Senator Warnock in Georgia and running for re-election. He is totally within his faith in what he is doing. And I think we need to be careful that we don't draw that line, which is not a constitutional line, so that pastors as leaders in the faith cannot speak about the things that are important for society and defend the rights of all people. Two editorial or two things in the paper this morning, one by a very conservative columnist that I usually disagree with, but I had to give him some props this morning. He was talking about Berkeley and 5 or 6 groups excluding Jews from their groups because they were Zionists. And he was protesting that very strongly. And the other one was an article about this this wedding planner that is, whose case is coming before the Supreme Court. I totally disagree with the understanding of the wedding planner. And you know that. But should we be, as a nation, saying you must violate your faith as much as I disagree with it? And force you to use your artistic talents to promote or celebrate those things that you believe are wrong? Is that not a violation of church in the state? Now, I think the guy's wrong in in his understanding of the faith. Gee, this is tough.
There is another example which, on first impulse, may be okay, but then you have to think about it a little bit deeper. If there is a town park, and if the town park decides that it's okay to erect a gigantic cross there, is that all right?
How about all those gigantic
Wait a minute.
crosses that
Why
are
not?
all along, Interstate 81, where you see 3 crosses up on the hilltop?
Yeah.
And that's probably private land, and it's
Yeah.
nobody's business, whoever owns the land.
It's private land. And some people may say,
But it's public view.
it's okay, initially they think so, they put up a cross. But how would you feel if they put up a Star of David? Or how would you feel if they put up a swastika even?
I think public parks, you don't place things like that. Private land, even though you can see it from the highway, you can't do much about that. People ought to be able to do what they want to on their private land, but I think public parks, you can't, do that. But, back even the last few years when I was teaching school, they told us we could not put up religious things on our bulletin boards.
You could decorate for Christmas, you could.
No, we couldn't.
Couldn't decorate for Christmas.
Well, we decorate for Christmas,
Well,
but
Santa
in a
Claus.
very different way. Santa Claus was kind of okay, but you don't,
Fiction is
you don't
okay.
put up,
Fiction is okay, it's true.
you don't put Mary and Jo, you don't put the nativity and say the reason for the season, don't forget. You don't use Jesus, that was,
Not Christmas.
yeah.
Festive,
and so-
festive things, but not.
Yeah, did they do that where you
Now,
were teaching?
I can remember, and I'm trying to think, because I remember Linda Anders was still there, and she said, I can't put up, she was in the office staff, she says, I've been told I can't put up a Christmas tree.
Well, they told us for safety reasons, they didn't want us putting up Christmas trees. They finally said if you don't have lights on it, you can put up a Christmas tree and make your garlands out of your paper garlands or popcorn or something and decorate it, but we couldn't put lights on the tree.
In the middle '80s, I was teaching working in the county school system here in the elementary schools. And one of the elementary schools, it was actually Spring, is closed now. But they had the 10 Commandments very proudly up on their bulletin board in the hall. And that was after it was not politically correct to do so. They just did that.
Well, they took it down at in Marshall, at the courthouse, didn't they have the 10 Commandments?
Probably.
I think they did, and they did over in, I think in Franklin, in front of the courthouse, and there was a big deal on WLOS about that, maybe about ours too.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, a little, you know how I am, just in the interest of stirring the pot. Okay, just in the interest of stirring the pot. When the First Amendment talks about the government not abridging the rights and doing all this stuff, they're talking about the government, the federal government. Two things I want to say after I say that. Number one, they used to have a cross up in North Township in Highland, Indiana, where we're from. And it was basically had to do with after the Second World War. It was to remember the people that gave their lives and died. But it was a cross. It was a Christian thing. Okay? And eventually there was a big stir about it. And they changed it to a flame. They made it an eternal flame, so it wouldn't be having us overcome reputation. Now, there's, in one, I don't know if it's Acts of the Apostles or someplace in the New Testament there, and not in the Gospels, in one of the epistles, Simon Magus wants to have Peter tell him, look, I want to know how you're doing these works so I can get people to follow and do all this stuff. And Peter wouldn't do it because Simon Magus wanted it to get a following to promote his church. And Peter wouldn't do it. And when they brought up Raphael Warnock in Georgia, Raphael Warnock, from what I can tell, I haven't seen anything to the contrary. He's not interested in promoting his church by being a senator. He's interested in helping the people of his state. So, those are.
But don't you think we can also get into a gray area when you start talking about other issues? Say, for instance, all of the Confederate statues.
Yeah.
I know there's a small Baptist church close to me, and they feel very strongly about the right to put out Confederate statues and very often Confederate flags and different things with the church affiliation and the church backing. I mean, I've heard of ministers preach about that. Granted, it wasn't in a church, it was at a funeral, which I was still a little shocked. But, and I think you also, that's one area I think is very strange, but there's another area I also think is very strange, and that's all about abortion. I mean, so much of that is not coming from your feelings about the child, but more about your religion and how you want to put your religious beliefs on other people and what you think, because a lot of this anti-abortion is affiliated with church support. And from what I can gather, and I think those two areas, to me, are two areas that get into a real dangerous non-separation of church and state.
Yes.
I was just gonna say, y'all probably heard about pharmacists and people who work in pharmacies who refuse to fill prescriptions for birth control or morning after pills because of their religious beliefs.
heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, that's, to me, kind of crazy. You work there, that's what you ought to do.
And corporations that won't include birth control as part of their medical package. Yeah.
So our society is built in such a way that some individuals have a really important role in delivering what a doctor prescribes. And a doctor has a really significant role in making a decision, sometimes a decision that will affect the unborn. So individuals in their roles vary in responsibility. Some of us don't have anything to do with that, so we can feel free and easy.
Well, it's interesting what CVS, Walgreens, at least, and there are probably others, have done about that. They're trying to walk the line of respect for people's beliefs on both sides and in different situations. What they're trying to do is also controversial. What their common understanding is, if you're a pharmacist and you don't believe in abortion, and this is a religious belief of yours, you don't have to fill that prescription, but you must turn that person over to someone else who in the store. Now, for a small pharmacy, an independent pharmacy, that's more difficult. But they're really trying to say, you don't get to impose your belief on the woman who has made a decision with her doctor's permission or prescription to fill you don't get to say no to the doctor and the woman, but you also don't have to fill that prescription yourself. And for CVS and Eagles and Walgreens and Walmart were big enough to have alternative people available. That works. Or does it?
Well, if I were gonna get a controversial prescription filled, I would go to a place that would have that attitude, that we will fill it. You know, if somebody turns me down, the other person will. I mean, I personally would just choose, you know, a place to have it done that wouldn't be so negative toward me.
I think go get another job if you don't agree with it. It's a free
You know, I wonder how they would feel in CVS if I went there to work as a teller, or not a teller, a salesperson. And I refused to sell cigarettes, because I feel strongly about cigarettes, and some people do that.
It's the same
What would they do if I was
Same
if I can't
principle.
sell cigarettes, you know?
CVS doesn't sell cigarettes anymore.
They don't, but
Well,
the
let's
vendors.
say Eagles, then they do.
Yeah, they do.
And any contraceptive as far as that goes, you know, because if you're, you know, a checkout person, someone could come up there with some form of contraceptive that
But you
doesn't
didn't
require.
approve.
Yeah, but you don't approve, what do you do?
Get another job.
Exactly.
If it's after you've been working there for 20 or 30 years, you can then quit, because now you have to give up something that you don't feel that you should, that didn't exist when you first took the job. You know what I mean?
It just goes round and
I
round.
mean, if you're one of these people that can't, you know, that can't dispense these drugs, and you know that this is what the store does, or the pharmacy, well, then you shouldn't even be applying in the first place.
Well, then you can move to a stopper, or some other position within the store that doesn't require the actual selling of the item.
Well, a pharmacist though is a high paying job,
Right, I know,
you know.
but I was thinking more of just a general checkout person.
Is that association?
Should there be a way that you can assess corporations, and should they have a statement of purpose? Should you look at their statement of purpose and see what their values are? Is it just to make money? And do you want to go with another organization that may have a riskier, outlook, but has more in your frame of reference for values? But what the question that was asked when Jesus was questioning Peter about, do you love me? And Jesus said, feed my sheep. That's taking care of physical needs. But the second time, what did he say?
Tending the flock.
Tend my sheep, which is more difficult. You can give food. Oh yeah, that makes me feel better. I gave food to the needy. But tend to people.
You need to be out in park talking to those people rather than selling drugs to them.
Can I put an idea in here, and I was listening to something Stacey Abrams said the other day in some interview she had, and it can go specifically to the example that Sally here is talking about with if you're a pharmacist and you're against abortion and somebody that gets an abortion prescription. Stacey Abrams is adamantly opposed to abortion, but she's not giving somebody permission to get an abortion. They are using she's not sanctioning their abortion, but she still is able to support a woman's right to choose because she's not giving that person permission. That person is making their own choice. So if I am opposed to abortion and I'm a pharmacist, and that didn't happen, but it came up later on, you should not have to give up your job or have somebody else do it. You should be able to fill that prescription because you are not giving her anything. She is obtaining something. That is her thing that is happening on. And that's where they try to put in a deception. Oh, you're sanctioning this if you give this. You're violating your religious beliefs if you fulfill this prescription. You are not. You have nothing to do with that person's religious belief. And that's where they deceive you and they divide us and push us into different camps.
But do we all have equal ability to make good choices? Whatever good choices are.
No, I think it's some bad choices.
Well, along that same line, it's within my right not to shop at Walmart simply because I don't agree with their policies.
Yeah, but
That's my decision, but it doesn't have anything to do with.
My point is they're putting this conscientious pharmacist who has a belief in a bad spot. They're deceiving her, saying that she's a sanctionist, saying she's not. She should have, it no way affects her religious belief if somebody asks her this and it's theirs. She is not saying, she is not giving them anything. They obtained it.
Well, it's about time for us to quit, unfortunately. Or maybe some of you are saying,
Stacey
thank
Abrams
you,
put
God.
that out. She is so against abortion, but she's
Related to Christian nationalism.
Christian
Well, I
nationalism.
wanna
I'm not
know how that
sanctioning.
came about.
They have a right
When
to
did
do
the
it.
idea come about this was a Christian nation? Because I don't think that's the way it's thought about. And when did that happen? When did it become?
Officially,
It never,
it's-
but I mean, when did people start thinking, or at least large groups of people, some groups of people, thinking that this is a Christian nation?
Well, they changed the thing on our dollar bill to God we trust from equal to Zoom back in the early 50s, starting way
But
back
it didn't
then.
say Jesus.
Huh?
It didn't say Jesus, it says in
No.
God.
Well, you don't do it all. You've been a salesman.
Y'all know when the phrase America First was first used?
It's old.
Huh?
It's old.
It was used when the United States was deciding whether or not to enter World War II. And Lindbergh and others who were pro-Nazi started using that phrase as a code to keep America out of World War II. And there were churches who did that too. But Christian nationalism has always been an undercurrent, but it's grown significantly for the last 50 years.
About the time that I was going to have the under God put in the
Yeah.
But didn't the Jewish people who are in the armed services face kind of anti-feeling from the other groups. There, I think it's been around a long time. I think Jews have been an object of Christian persecution.
But the Jewish community sees a very great difference between the persecution that preceded Hitler and the Shoah. And they see the situation, what happened, what we call the Holocaust, they call the horror, the Shoah, as being totally different from what preceded that, because it was extermination, attempted extermination throughout the world of the Jewish people. So yes, it's always been, but they, I think, right, see what happened, and also other nations at the same time as being a whole different level of people.
Shall we explore some of this next Sunday? And look for examples that you see and maybe have glossed over in our daily lives and in the newspaper, examples of Christian nationalism.
I think a lot of these opinions on a lot of the different subjects that we've touched on this morning, it's been a domino effect as far as opinions of people. It's just, you know, if you believe like this, then that kind of touches, you know, just like when we were talking about, well, that reminds me of this, and that reminds me of this. It's all a domino effect. And I think we need to think about that, you know, how people influence us, and yeah, I think it's worth continuing.
3 really quick announcements. First of all, next Sunday, if I'm not mistaken, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that is the return of our fellowship luncheon. So that will be after the 11:15 a.m. next Sunday.
Yes.
On Saturday next week, we are partnering with Bright Hope Laurel United Methodist Church, and we're having a pumpkin carving, a games, and a community potluck. So everyone's invited to that. It's at 4 p.m. That is on behalf of both churches. So please make an effort at 4 p.m. to come out next. I guess you can maybe cook the same thing twice or something like that if you want to partake in both, but it should be nice fun. And then lastly, just continuing the thought on Tuesday and voting and early voting coming up and things of that nature. I don't know if, I assume this was mentioned, but there is one party for the county commissioner where all of those are up for revote. So just keep that in mind. I myself am unaffiliated. I'll say that, but there is one party where everyone on that party is up for re-election, and it's an interesting potential there. There's also a community block party on Tuesday night that we are invited to at the Fellowship Hall at Roy Hill Chapel. It is celebrating a couple of things. It's celebrating, I think, Indigenous Peoples Day, which is actually tomorrow, formerly known as Columbus Day. It's also celebrating Disability Awareness Month, and it is celebrating, I believe, Pride with Prism, and that's beginning at 8 p.m. in the Fellowship Hall Tuesday night at Roy Hill Chapel. I guess that was for announcements.
Yes, and the coat drive is still on. If you could get good winter coats, men, women, and children's coats, so that we can take them to Bright Hope Laurel because they drive for winter coats. So you could bring it by Tuesday, and leave it in the fireside room, please. Okay.
You want one?
Yeah.
You can have that one.
Wow.
Nobody's playing jumble.
Okay.
I had a whole bunch of them. What do you think?
Fried greens and
They're nice. It was delicious. It's just, no, it just comes up.
Well, I wish that our last meeting was like, yes, in a lot. Yeah, that sounds like,
But I didn't use.
you know,
meat.
No, I used
and to talk serious, but I'm sure, I use chopped onions and garlic. I meant to have my cornflakes and cheese
And salt and pepper.
No, I just had one more. Oh, I'm really good.
I'm not.
So, yeah, I made it like, you know, it's really funny because when I got this car, I said, oh, of course.
I'm Southern.
I'm tired of it. And I